Well, hello. Hello, Maddie. Welcome to the
Hi,
show. This
thank
is
you.
special to see you today. So, I just introduced you, and so my listeners know a little bit about you. But if you could share kind of your backstory and what got you to where you are now as a registered dietitian and an educator in the diabetes space. Yeah, we'd love to know more about you personally.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think maybe a little bit of diagnosis journey is in order.
Yeah.
When I was diagnosed when I had just turned 14. And so at the time, it was an interesting time because I was kind of old compared to back then standards. And
Sure.
they still kind of called it juvenile diabetes. And
Hmm.
so I was a weird one, but here I am. So my diagnosis, we didn't know what was going on, but I was losing a lot of weight. My hair was falling out. I was so thirsty. I was peeing like crazy, just all the classic symptoms. And so I had everything like that going on. And then one day at school, my teacher was like, "Hey, you don't look good. You're going home." I said, "Great." I don't feel good. I love school. I loved being there. So that was kind of a hard thing, but I felt so bad that I just wanted to leave. And I'm glad I did. My mom picked me up and we went home. And for the next few days, I was on the couch and I never got better. And so my mom called my dad and was like, "What do I do?" He was on business at the time and he was like, "Take her to the ER." So she said, "Okay." So we got in the car. We went to the ER. Before that, though, I was so hungry and thirsty. I had this huge bowl of Cheerios with a lot of milk and some cranberry juice. That's important for the detail of the diagnosis. But so I go to the ER and they're like, "Oh, you don't look good." I was like, "Okay, thanks." So I am, sitting there waiting for some test results. They're like, "Hey, we can't find anything wrong with you." Now, I guess Maddie is sassy when she's diabetic because I've had some sass throughout my diabetes journey, but I looked at the doctor and I said, "Try again. Something is wrong. Try again." And he was like, "Okay, fine. We'll take blood. We'll take urine." I was like, "Great. I got to pee anyways." So went, did that, gave blood, came back, hung out for a sec. And then the doctor walked back in and he said, "Hey, we found ketones in your urine. Your blood sugar is 900 something. There's an ambulance out back for you. You have type 1 diabetes and you will never again have a perfect record of health." And with that, he walked out of the room. So naturally, I start crying, and my mom's freaking out. I'm a triplet. There's three of me, kind of. I have brothers.
Interesting.
Yeah, but she was home alone because my dad was on business, and they were like an hour and a half away doing a fun weekend thing. And she called them and was like, "Figure out how to get home." And they were like, "What? We're all 14, we don't know what we're doing." Um, but anyways, I get in the ambulance and they take me to the children's hospital, and that is where I spent the next 2 or 3 days learning, getting the fire hose of diabetes 101. And it was a lot, but we made it work. And yeah, so that's my diagnosis. And then for the next year or two, in truth, I was angry. Why me? Why me? There's three of us. Why me? Right? I love my brothers. I'm glad they didn't get diabetes. I'm glad it's me. Um, but I was so angry and so frustrated. And anyways, it just wasn't really healthy for me. Now, my dad is specifically military, so we PCSed to California from Virginia. I got diagnosed in Virginia, then we moved to California, and that was junior year. So now it's junior year of high school. We move, and in my Virginia time, I was in the theater. I love singing and dancing, performing. I play instruments. Like I love that space. But I decided it wasn't my full time. So I was like, "Okay, Maddie, what are you going to do now?" So I joined this organization called HOSA. It used to be Health Occupation Students of America. They've changed the acronym now. But HOSA, you can still find it as HOSA. Anyways, I joined it and I did a healthy lifestyle competition. That is finally when I got a CGM. So I could start seeing what was going on with my blood sugar. So I did a bunch of data analytics and looked at how different macronutrients and different meals impacted my blood sugar. So I was tracking. I tried veganism, vegetarianism, did a lot of like meat-based meals, and just learned what was happening with my blood sugar. And that was a profound experience for me. I did it the next year with an insulin pump. So I finally had the technology working for me. And all of that made me realize that I pretty much immediately realized, okay, I need to become a dietitian. And I'm going to work in diabetes because I also had never had anyone who was my diet friend. So basically, I do what I do now, type 1, type fun, diabetes education and advocacy to help people navigate all of diabetes and to not feel so alone because it can be lonely and overwhelming and exhausting, but we don't have to do it alone. And thank goodness for the connectivity that we have with technology. So that's why I coach today. So that's my long story for you.
Yeah. And you've painted a beautiful picture, because I'm just getting to know you as a lot of my listeners are. So what year was that? If I can just put the timeline around, because you mentioned CGM, because they've only been around for, gosh, maybe 15 years. I'm trying to think back when
Yeah.
I got mine
Yeah,
for the first time.
I became a Dexcom girly in 2014 or
Okay.
15, 14 or
10
15.
years. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it feels like it hasn't been that much time, but now I can say it's been a decade, which is weird.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the statement that you said about your doctor upon diagnosis,
Hmm.
wow. A
Yeah.
lot of us, I remember I was diagnosed in 82. And when, even then they were saying, oh, 5 years are going to have a cure. There was,
Yeah.
there wasn't really much really conversation about really limitations or what my future would hold, because at that time they just said, oh, it's okay. We're going to have you can count on a cure within the next 5 years. I think everybody's got that story.
Yeah.
But it's interesting where he said that and the quote that you said says it a lot better than what I'm going to try to butcher it. But basically, your health will, almost like it's on a decline starting now, which is, wow.
Yeah. It was
Yeah.
terrifying at the time.
Especially
And
at your age. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, I
Yeah. I
definitely
was the
didn't
same
recognize
age.
that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It
Oh,
was
yeah. I
hard.
was 14 as well, diagnosed. So,
Oh,
yeah, there's a
okay.
connection there for sure. Not,
Absolutely.
yeah, it's not like we don't have enough going on with hormones at that age. Oh, yeah,
I
yeah.
know.
And then you toss in something like that, not only socially and, just what we have to deal with, and just accepting the disease. So I can totally relate. And speaking of social, today we're going to talk about social gatherings,
Yes.
eating out. And this is a topic we have not had on the show. We've talked a lot about food. I've had a handful of registered dietitians in here. There's only been one other, Kelly Schmidt. She's been in here a few times, and she also lives with type 1. I think that is such a unique and valuable connection that we can all resonate with, because, we can go to dietitians. I remember my first trip to a dietitian when I was pregnant with my daughter back in 1996. Believe it or not, that was my first visit with a dietitian.
Yeah.
um, 14 years after diagnosis, right? If I'm calculating that right. And how profound that was, because she taught me something very simple, because as we know, pregnancy is something where we really got to have a really close watch on our blood sugar, is balancing and combining food. I'm like, what? Nobody told me about this. So, and since then, obviously, we're talking almost 30 years later. It's a game changer. So I
Absolutely.
still remember sitting there in her office learning that. Isn't that something?
I'm
Yeah.
so glad that you had such a good experience because
Mm-hmm.
I've worked specifically with hundreds of type 1 diabetics and type 2 and gestational LATA, everyone. And one of my first questions or in the first session or two that we have is, have you worked with a dietitian before? And how
Mm-hmm.
was that experience? Because unfortunately, I've had a lot of people that were like, oh, they just said, don't do this, don't do that. They didn't know diabetes, they didn't whatever. I was like, okay, that's context that's very helpful for me because I'm going to treat you like a person and I have diabetes too. And I absolutely refuse to not live my life. So we'll make sure we manage it together. We'll figure it out together, whatever it looks like.
So what do you think navigating dining out and social events? Why do you think that's so stressful for us? For some of
Yeah.
us, I mean, that's a blanket statement, but for some of
Yeah.
us, it can be stressful, right?
Yeah, either for some of us or for certain situations. But I
Mm-hmm.
think it's really stressful because of the unknown factor. And there's always a lot of unknowns, I think. I try not to use the words always and never, but I feel like there's there's always something we might not know that's going on with diabetes. And so,
Yeah.
um, so the unknown is really, I think, the biggest question mark and the concern. And okay, well, when's the food going to come? What is it going to look like? What's the portion size? What are the ingredients? Is there a tablespoon or two of honey that I'm not seeing in this? That's an extra 20, 30 carbs. So all of a sudden, I think the unknown is the biggest challenge, the biggest scary factor.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's my husband and I, who also lives with type 1, I don't know if you knew that, but
I did not.
it's interesting, yeah. And we do better eating at home naturally because we love to cook. We know what we're cooking with, what we're preparing. It's almost, we can almost do it blindly, because we're so used, which is a good thing. It's a comfortable thing. We always say when we go out, and it's not that we go out with any sort of negative connotations, but we know the outcome may be a little different based on where we go, what we choose to eat. I think it also helps going to places you've been before. Maybe this is something too that you can talk about is, when you've gone to a restaurant, not that we want to keep going to the same restaurant all the time, that's a little dull, especially where I live, we've got some amazing restaurant choices. So you want to be able to have some variety, but still have confidence with understanding the menu, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the biggest things I actually recommend to a lot of my the people that I work with, a lot of my clients, I'll say, "Hey, you know what? I want you to experiment. I want you to go back. I want you to try it again because here's the thing. If it works, great. Now you might know the strategy. And if
Yeah.
it doesn't work, not great, but great. We're going to use that information to our advantage. So either way, I actually just sent someone home yesterday with a spaghetti experiment, so to speak. And so we'll see how that goes the rest of this week. But I said, hey, 2 or 3 nights in a row, I know, spaghetti, you might not want to eat it for another month or two, but have it for a few nights in a row and let's see how it goes each day. See what's different, see what's not, and try to have as similar factor as possible. We'll figure out what's happening here, there, everywhere, and we make it work. So whether it's home, testing out that spaghetti, or out and about at a restaurant, go back, do it, because you will feel more empowered when you try again and you get a little bit more information. It's like you're if you don't do it, that's okay. But if you can do it, you're going to get past that block, that barrier, and you're going to feel so good about it. Like imagine that's like to me it's like okay, if you have a goal to do 10 pull-ups and you can only do 8, what are you going to do? Stop at 8? Oh, I can't do 10 pull-ups. I'm never going to be able to do. Or do you keep trying? 8's going to get you to 9. 9's going to get you to 10. In my opinion, it's the same way with blood sugar for the most part.
Yeah, I totally agree. And yeah, we learn by experimenting. And then if we are in tune and working with somebody like you that can kind of set up that line of success, but using it as feedback, our data as feedback. It's telling us, like you say, what worked, what didn't work. I think one of the things, I know we're kind of jumping around here a little bit, but I wanted to talk about too those other factors because people think, oh, if I go out and I have, let's just, we'll use the spaghetti as an example. In the past, this has worked, right? And when they have that disappointing response with blood sugar, a spike or, something that maybe carries on, they're, I think in a sense, they're really focusing on that as a failure and not really looking at all the aspects because, as living with diabetes, it's more than just the food.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely it
so
is.
much other things.
It
And I think
is.
that's where it, like you say, that block happens. That okay, it didn't work. It's not going to work. I'm not going to try it again. Um, but again, I think that gives them more practice in learning how their body responds and how those other factors kind of work into the equation. Basically, how much do I dose? Right? It's all coming back to carb counting, dosing, and then all of that. So I
Yeah.
want to ask you too, tools or apps, do you use anything specific that you recommend or you yourself use?
Absolutely. So I use a lot of different things for work
Hmm.
because I'm on several platforms. But
Hmm.
primarily, the thing that taught me everything I need to know, I have to give all the credit to chronometer or chronometer. I don't know how you're
Okay.
technically supposed to say
Hmm.
it, but I've said
Hmm.
chronometer for over 10 years now. So it's chronometer in
Hmm.
my head. It's a little orange app with an Apple icon and a target through it. If you're not familiar, it's
Okay.
a wonderful app. Sometimes I think it's a little TMI for general population. It gives micronutrients, which I think is super cool, but
Right.
it gives you macros too. So it helps break things down. I do think there's pros and cons of every single app out there.
Mm.
But the thing I like about Chronometer is it is not user generated. So on my Fitness Pal, for example, love my Fitness Pal. I use it all the time. But on my Fitness Pal, if someone wants to track calories, they can put in, hey, a cup of rice, 200 calories, zero carbs, zero fat, zero protein. You and I immediately know that's inaccurate, but they're just counting calories. So they added that to the database because they can and because that's all they need. Now, if someone doesn't know that carbs come are in rice, right? Then all of a sudden they might have a really interesting blood sugar situation. So that's why I like Chronometer is because they do have a verified database. I used it back in the day when I tracked on Chronometer for almost 6 years, almost every day to learn about food and micronutrients, macronutrients, all the things.
Just said something very profound. Learn about food, right? Because I mean,
Yes.
the average person, I think we're forced to on some level, when food is so important
Yes.
with, with what we, are trying to do every day and feel our best. But yeah, the average person really doesn't understand, carbohydrates, the types of carbs, how much fiber, how impactful fiber is for that whole equation. And then, we've already touched on combining foods and how important that is. So yeah, learn
Yes.
about food. So the
Learn.
chronology, I'm going to butcher the name too. Is that where you are keying in the actual food? So it gives you examples of food. So you're just kind of choosing a kind of like a red apple type of thing. And then is that how it
Yes.
works? Okay.
Yes, and it doesn't have all of the foods you might be able to find in the database. Like it's not going to have the latest and greatest, whatever the newest snack is, and it's not going to have every menu option on every fast food chain, but
Mm-hmm.
it's going to have a lot of whole foods, real foods, and it gives you a lot of different ways to measure it. So you can measure by volume or weight. So do you have a cup or do you have 12 ounces or do you have, I think what's a good example? Carrots is a good example. They'll give you whole carrots, baby carrots, slices of carrots. It's really helpful, I think, to help adapt and individualize, which is really cool.
And not to mention portion size, how important that is, right? All
Yes.
those pieces to the puzzle, right?
Yeah.
So when you're working with somebody, or maybe you can use yourself as an example because
Yeah.
you work with yourself, don't you,
I
as
do.
well. If when you are ready to go out to eat, how do you work? Because I think this would be great for the listeners to kind of have a kind of an action plan. So, what is the best case getting ready, preparing ourselves to eat out? We'll call
Yeah.
it dinner. We'll call it a dinner.
Yeah.
So, what
This
does
is
that look like?
such a good question. And I think before I answer, I'll give some context and whether it's myself or others that I work with. When I work with people, I say, hey, my goal is for you not to need me long term. As sad as that day is, once it comes, I want to teach you so thoroughly so that you understand it like you're your own mini dietitian. Not that anyone is certified as a dietitian by me, but you understand food through and through. That is the goal that I have with people because that helps me answer this next question. If I'm going into a meal with the context I have, it's going to look different than what I would recommend for someone who I first teach a restaurant protocol. So, me going in, I know the things that I'm going to do. That might be different from someone who's starting. So, I'll start with maybe someone who is starting out. So, let's say you have T1D or you have blood sugar considerations, you're going to a restaurant that maybe you haven't been to before. Let's start there. So I'll say, okay, eventually it'd be great if we can just kind of go in and figure it out on the fly and make it work as best as we can. That's what I do. But if you're worried or if you're not sure, then I would say, okay, let's start from the basics. So first of all, go online. Do they have pictures? Do they have a menu? Do they have food information, options, ideas? All of a sudden, even like Yelp reviews, you can look at photos, and all of a sudden, what you can do is you can gather context. So, okay, you know what? That's actually the largest plate of enchiladas I've ever seen in my life. Or, oh, it's just one enchilada, a little scoop of rice and beans. Okay, got it. So you can start gathering that context, right? Because if you're getting this plate versus maybe this plate, you'll know. Now, I did also work in this food service for a while, so I'm very familiar with the size of food things and cups and silverware. So when I see that in a photo, I have that context to say, okay, that's, I mean, forks aren't that crazy different, right? You're not going to get a fork that's like this probably, or like this probably. So if you see that fork in the photo, you can say, okay, maybe that's about this much, or oh, there's a cup that looks like a 16-ounce glass. If you have that context now you're gathering that context. So that's my best recommendation, whether it's on the menu itself, if there's photos, the description can be helpful, especially I know that they don't do it this way for all food things, but in the beverage industry, which I was also in, oftentimes ingredients are listed from greatest to least, kind of like a nutrition label, right? So we have the most prominent ingredients first, followed by the rest. So you might be able to gather some context there too. Now, I will say they might highlight, oh, there's chicken in this, or there's this and that, whatever they want to do, but that might be context, maybe. So before we've even gone in, we can gather a lot of information. We can see what's going on, maybe what we might be dealing with portion wise, and then you go in. Now, this is the best thing I can say is you have to know how to advocate for yourself. It's scary, it's tough, it's difficult. Sometimes it causes a little bit of social anxiety, but if you can learn, I have this great free guide that I'm happy to share with you if anyone's interested, but it's how to advocate for yourself, how to speak about diabetes, right? Because that's so helpful. So this is, right, my context going in, I don't even have to teach myself to advocate for myself. I might need to teach that to someone else. So there's those layers of context. Now, what do I mean when I say advocate for yourself? Now you're at the restaurant. You've done the research. You have as much as you can before you go. Now you go. Maybe you've picked out what you're going to eat. Maybe you're looking to see if there's any daily specials or something like that, but you kind of have the context. Now, maybe you're ordering and you say, hey, I'd like to order the tacos, please. Just would you mind telling me, is it like a street taco or is it like a larger taco? Right there, right? We know that's maybe double the carb. And how many tacos come with the plate? Oh, it's three street tacos actually. Okay, great. Is there a side with that? Oh, rice and meat. Okay, great. Or French fries, whatever it may be. So now you're asking those questions, right? Because if you're getting this pizza versus this pizza, this taco versus this taco, this sandwich versus this sandwich, you all of a sudden have so much more information about the potential carb. Now, unless it's a super specialty restaurant where they're like serving you keto bread, you could probably assume it's regular bread, regular tortilla, not a super high fiber tortilla, something that we might use at home. But that's the context. Now, the last piece that I will say is ask the waiter or server if you can figure it out. This is the advocating for yourself. You don't owe anyone an explanation. But if you're comfortable to add that information, I think it helps sometimes. And sometimes I'll say, hey, do you know about how long it's taking to get meals out to the table? I'm diabetic. I just need to know when to take my medication. And usually when I say that, people are like, oh yeah. Before I say that, sometimes people are like, it'll get there when it gets there.
Right.
Usually not.
Yeah.
Usually everyone's pretty nice. But if you ever run into that, I find that if you're comfortable explaining, you don't owe anyone an explanation. But if you're comfortable adding that detail, usually people are pretty helpful, just like they are with allergy. Hey, I'm allergic to this. Okay, we'll make sure the kitchen knows whatever it is. Same with that. So ask those questions, ask for context, ask for timing, look around. Did they just sit down? Did they get their meal in 3 minutes? You probably need to take your insulin if you're into a pre-bolusing game. If they're sitting there, you've seen them for 10 minutes, you're now just ordering, they haven't gotten their food and they've already ordered. Okay, now you have a little bit more timing context. Look around, find the bigger picture. So there's so many factors. I haven't covered everything, but this is just how I start to think through a restaurant.
Perfect. Yes, yes. And you brought up some things that we all think about. And these are things that I've talked with my clients about as well. Is that anxiety, okay, when do I bolus?
Yeah.
Should I have something at the table just in case? Which I always say, why not? I tend to just personally, I've always got some sort of like sugar tabs. Again,
Yeah.
there can be those situations where the food just suddenly doesn't come out in time. So we've got
Yes.
those little inside things that we can do just
Yeah.
to kind of keep our blood sugar at bay until the food arrives. But
Yes.
timing is everything, right? How
Absolutely, it
often do I
is.
say that every day? It's all about
Yeah.
timing and being able
Yeah.
to prepare the best you can.
It
Awesome. I
is.
love
And
that.
last thing I will say too, if anyone's ever, pre-bolusing before the food gets there or something, again, advocate for yourself. I tend to recommend if you're gonna have 100 carbs, if you're pre-bolusing for it and the food's not there, you better have 100 carbs in your purse, your fanny pack, your pocket, whatever it may be, just in case. Or ask for a soda, ask for
Yeah.
some bread, because there have been situations where one time I pre-bolused for an Italian dinner, they
Mm.
forgot about us. They didn't get the order in for
Mm.
30 minutes. I was making the bread happen. I had a soda, and
Right.
then I was full, unfortunately, from those things. But it
Just
happens.
pasta, right?
It happens, and just ask. Say, hey, I don't mean to be rude. I'm diabetic. I
Yeah.
I took medication for this. Is it coming soon, or could I get a soda? Then they know. Okay, they have an option.
Yeah. Yeah. Really good advice. Absolutely. Always. And we do typically leave the house. Most of us on any good days. I'm guilty of forgetting the chewies on the way out. But come prepared. Have the purse. And I always say it's a little easier for us girls, ladies. We got a purse to put it in. I always joke
Yeah.
about that too. And it's funny because I was talking about my husband, but I tend to pack it for us in case he
Hmm.
needs it. And it doesn't take a lot of room up in your purse. So, there's always that safety, kind of go-to safety
Yeah.
thing.
Also,
Absolutely.
runner's belts are pretty great for our
Ah,
gentlemen who don't want to show any merce or fanny pack or anything like that.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Hide it
And,
under your shirt.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's ways to do it. Yeah. And, that goes back to advocating. We should be going out, enjoying a social time and not let the pressure or what we consider to be something that's not going to work out to dampen our fun. And it affects everybody that you're with as well, and they can kind of pick up on, that sense of, apprehension about, what's going to come out. I'm guilty. This is something that I think the number one thing that when we go to places that I typically don't expect them to have good choices on the menu, and you have to be really open-minded to what the choices can be. And like you say, speak to the waiter, or if there's some sort of staff that you can refer to, and to give them that feedback. I've done that myself, and just say, or doing some substitutions. Like if there's fries that are, the normal side on, a sandwich, and say, hey, can I substitute that for, say, a salad or a side of vegetables? And those are things I've done too, just to kind of offset what could be a train wreck with blood sugar. So always
Yeah.
thinking ahead, right?
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
think you hit on a great point there is we don't have to sub the fries, but we can. And that's
Hmm.
really cool. Theoretically, we can. And why I think why you're doing that, right? You learned that balance years ago,
Yeah.
and that fiber that you're going to get from the salad or whatever it may be, a fruit cup, something that's going to
Hmm.
benefit you. And I will actually say too, I didn't say this for restaurant, but I think it's an important detail to add for that balance piece. But I often say this is for, we talked a lot about making sure that we have the timing and all that, but let's say food comes out in 3 minutes, you haven't taken your insulin yet, maybe you're typically pre-bolusing, right? So you need that time. I will say if you cannot pre-bolus, or if you didn't pre-bolus or something happened, right? Things are always out of our control, but I would say start with the non-carb and then move to the carb, because that's going to slow the signs of digestion is very cool. I won't spend the time on that, but
Yeah,
there's science that
absolutely.
goes behind it. So if you can have that side salad first, sure, maybe you didn't get your full pre-bolus, but your spike is going to be benefited as
Yeah.
compared to without.
Absolutely. Yes, yes. And I've done exactly that as well. Yes.
Yeah.
It's funny because traditionally in restaurants they do serve the salad first. So,
Yeah.
just that flow of when the food comes out is good for our digestive system for
Yeah.
sure.
Or the bread, which is a whole different
Oh,
science.
right? And then it flip-flops, right?
Yes.
I'm noticing more restaurants. This is kind of a side note, but I'm noticing more restaurants are not bringing bread out.
Yeah.
Have you, I
Yeah.
don't know if that's just, maybe that's just where we're going, but, and it's
Yeah, I
all, and
know.
it's restaurants that we've been to before.
Hmm.
And it's one of those, well, I'm glad they're not, but then it's like, oh, I kind of miss the bread because it was really good. It's, it's like anything. It's the good or bad. But it's an observation that both my husband and I have picked up on in some of the restaurants that we've gone before. So, yes.
Interesting.
Yeah, right. You mentioned something too about not only advocating for the menu and our choices and with the kitchen staff and, what we can expect with what comes out, but when it comes to monitoring our blood sugar, I think, and this, maybe we'll step away from the food topic for just a minute because, but we'll be back. I wanted to, that uncomfortableness of who we're with at dinner and that balance of focusing on what you need during that social of time without it being a deterrent or even a kind of a buzzkill for the table because Melissa's conscious of what's going to come out of the kitchen. I've had some delicate situations like that, not delicate, but a little uncomfortable. And I think I've learned from that because, yeah, we've got to pay attention and be conscientious of what we need without it being the focus of the dinner with friends. And then you're talking about monitoring our blood sugar during the meal, whether it's checking the blood sugar, if we're still using a glucometer, or how often we're taking our CGM, or I mean, in our case, it's a phone because it's on an app because it's different for everybody because everybody, you know, um, not all of us, kind of look and check at the same time. What I'm thankful for is I have an Apple Watch that now has it on there. So, yeah, so I don't take that for granted. So we're not having to pull the phone out or the monitor out, I think it's the monitor. I don't even know what they call it, but the
PDM.
monitor that comes with the system that I know some people still use. But even checking, doing a finger prick. I remember back in the days doing the finger prick at the table and even excusing myself to go to the bathroom to do it because I
Yeah.
didn't want it to be the focus of the table. And then, so what do you think about that? All those different scenarios. I mean, and I know that's a lot of information because it depends on who you are, what kind of therapy you're using, how you're checking your blood sugar. But yeah, if you can give us some advice on doing that.
Yeah, I absolutely think it depends on who we are, right? So for me, I think I have this bold self-confidence where I'm like, okay, you know what? This is my
Mm-hmm.
health. It's important. Just like, I mean, you don't have to do that, but okay, maybe someone needs to make sure there's no peanuts in the recipe, right? That's not, I don't see that as an inconvenience. Like, yes, please don't die at this table. Do what you have to do. And that is something that I do think it depends though. So if you asked first few years, Maddie, I'm running to the bathroom. No questions asked. I didn't have the greatest technology anyways, but I'm running to the bathroom. Now my pump is on the outside of my outfit. Guess what? If someone asks about it, they're getting a little bit of education because that's who I am.
It's an
Uh,
opportunity,
it
absolutely.
is an opportunity, yeah. But not everyone has to be comfortable. If someone says, hey, what is that? I'll say, hey, thank you for asking. This is an insulin pump. I'm type 1 diabetic. It gives me the medication I need to stay alive. Are you familiar with type 1 diabetes? And usually we can have this great
Mhm.
conversation. Now, if someone says, hey, what is that? You could say, hey, it's a medical device. Thanks for asking. And that's it. You could leave it there. Or you could say, hey, I don't actually prefer talking about it, but how was your day? And flip it, right? So
There's
there's a
ways to
lot of
handle it.
different, yeah, there's different
Yeah.
ways to handle it.
Hmm.
And same with how you treat the table, right? So you can quietly check your blood sugar if you don't want it to distract from the table. If you're the one talking, maybe it's a little different. Maybe you do have to announce something, but it doesn't have to be. It's up to you, right? So if you want to be loud and proud, do it. If you want to be a little bit quieter and have that moment but stay at the table, do it. If you're uncomfortable and want to leave, do that too. I think the only thing I've ever done, which I remember I had a pump failure once upon a time. So I was on manual injections for like a week, and I travel a week out of every month for the most part for the last few years. So I am always on a plane, and I was on a plane during this time. And I was in the middle because I was one of the last to board in Southwest. Anyways, so I was in the middle and I said, hey, excuse me, because the people next to me, they didn't have headphones in. They weren't really doing anything. They were just looking. I was like, hey, excuse me, I just want to let you know I'm diabetic and I need to take a shot of insulin. Do needles make you pass out? I asked. And one of them was like, nope, I'm a nurse. And one of them was like, I don't care. It's like, okay, great. And so I took my insulin. But if one of them had felt uncomfortable, I would have gone to the restroom, absolutely. But that was what I felt was considerate at the time. And I was like, hey, this is what I feel I need to do. You could also never explain yourself, excuse yourself to go to the bathroom, or take it. I think I'm always cautious to it, especially even if I open something with nuts and there's people around like, hey, does anyone have a nut allergy? Maybe that's just the dietitian in me. I don't know. But I will always ask just to make sure that people are comfortable, because at the end of the day, I don't know what they've been through. And especially if that's triggering for them or if it's not a great experience for them, I feel confident enough to put it out there for them to have the choice. You don't have to give anyone else the choice, but I feel that confidence. I do that because I feel that that is a part of what I can do. But if you can't, that's okay. You do something else. You make it
Yeah.
work for you.
Yes, yes. It is all about communicating.
Yeah.
Yeah, just in a very gentle, soft way, just kind of introducing to somebody to what you're wanting to do in the next minute. And if they're comfortable with it. I love that. Yeah. And you have a wonderful way of just, just the way that you put that in context. So it's really, really, really helpful. I
Yeah.
love that. Really
Thank
nice.
you.
So
Not everyone will be as nice though. So I think that's
I'm,
important to say too.
yeah,
I actually, on
yeah.
another plane, once upon a time, quick story, on another
Hmm.
plane, my pump was beeping and this woman was giving me this side eye.
Oh,
I could feel it, but my pump was beep. I was low. And she eventually leaned over and was like, could you please put your headphones in? And I said, hey, the beeping is an insulin pump. I'm diabetic. I might die without this equipment. I cannot stop the volume, but I'm sorry that it's bothersome to you. She felt
mm,
so bad. She didn't look at me the rest
mm,
of the time. And I was like, hey,
mm.
I see, I get it, but
Yeah,
like, I can't. I can't. And so,
yeah,
just again, if someone comes at you, if someone's nice, great. And if someone's not so nice,
right.
again, say what you need to say. I try my best to stay kind and considerate, and
Yeah,
kindness and human decency are my core values. So, if I can bring that back to them, even regardless of the
yeah.
energy they gave me, then I think it helps too. So, be aware that not everyone will be super nice, but
Hmm.
it's how you respond that makes all the difference.
Yeah, kindness is really it. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And that can really help to diffuse the situation or not, yeah, cause it to escalate and all that. So beautiful. I love that example. Yeah, you're giving me some tips about context too coming up. So let's get back to food.
Yes.
So dosing.
Mhm.
This is again one of the number one things that I work on with women as well. And we have another thing going on when we're getting a little bit older. You will be there one day, I promise, as far as when hormones change, although hormones impact us at all ages. So, throughout our cycle. But it can be a variable when, especially when you add in eating out and really trying to figure out how much, what you're going to eat, how much the dose is going to be, and being comfortable with that decision on what it is that you ate and dosed and, the outcome. And so what is your advice? And I know it's different because it's different scenarios, different people, different food. But going in, how can we set ourselves up for success when it comes to doing it?
Yes. I think the best thing to do is to know your body. I tell people break the rules. So for example, a basic rule we have is maybe a 15-minute pre-bolus. Well, you know
Mhm.
what?
Yeah.
If that causes you to go low, probably shouldn't be doing that. If that causes you, if it doesn't really help that much, maybe we need to think about our carbs, our carb ratio, whatever. But maybe if everything else is correct, maybe we do need a slightly longer pre-bolus. So I say take the rules and break them to make them work for you. You are now responsible for your trends and your needs. And if the status quo or the standard isn't working for you, do something else. So going into that situation, whether it's hormones, whether it's a restaurant, whether it's something we don't know, you have to know you. And I would say, right, we talked about that restaurant strategy. I said there was a lot more we could talk about. Maybe something else to consider is whether someone's new to restaurants or me, myself, going into a restaurant, we talked about it like our settings are correct and we know our pre-bolus and we understand how to bolus and we're comfortable taking 10 units of insulin if that's the amount of carbs we're eating. But if we're not, if we don't have those foundational things set, we can still go out and do our best. But I would say if you can take the time, it takes a week, 2, 3, or 4 max. Typically with my clients, we will sit down, we'll make sure everything's working so that now it's not about are the numbers correct? It's about, okay, what do I need to find? What do I need to gather? So you can be detective without having to figure out if there is a foundation, a baseline set for you. You set the foundation first and then figure out those factors if possible.
Yeah, yeah, I love that too. Yeah, setting the foundation first. There are things we can control in our life, believe it or not, and those are choices. So, and this is a term I used. I tend to use it more around the holidays, but because holidays we have more social settings. But and I don't know if you've, and I have a feeling you're going to connect with this. But I front load my day.
Mhm.
So let's say I've got a 5 o'clock dinner going out, there's going to be a social setting, appetizers and dinner. Well, knowing that, it's nice to have a plan, right? So, I'm just getting super hydrated. I'm staying active that day. My lunch is power packed with lots of vegetables, protein. So again, I'm front loading. I'm doing all I can to go into that situation with a successful day of choices. And it can only help. It can only help because I think, those expectations too, especially when our goal, and I'm assuming you're like this as well. My goal every day is to eat really good, healthy foods, whole foods. And as sometimes when we go out, we're not going to quite get those choices. Now, this is actually an interesting, um, example because tonight as we're recording this my husband and we host a T1D social here in our city, so we get some people that we've met over the years and there's more people coming into our group, so we meet once a month for kind of a happy hour dinner, um, scenario at a restaurant. And I'm already thinking ahead. Today's a good example because the food has good, there's some good choices, but it's still not like eating at home, is it? It's
Yeah.
not as predictable as that. So, so I will go through that checklist of myself, just trying to kind of front load my day, knowing that later this is this is going to be what's going to happen. So, I love having a plan, the best we can, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think your why is important too. It's clear to me that you're prioritizing health and really great whole foods.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of the people that I work with too are T1Ds specifically who want a little bit of weight loss or some, their body composition to change a bit. And something that we talk about is preloading for the fact that I say live your life, incorporate blood sugar and all the nutrition things. I'm not going to put you in a box and try to tell you to fit your life back in. This doesn't work. And so when we do this, right, you can still go out tonight, have fun, have your whatever it may be. But okay, are we trying to hit a protein goal? Did we get enough veggies? How much water do we have? Absolutely, you're right. Front loading can make that a lot easier. And I think what I will say too is it sounds like you already have a foundation, a baseline. If someone doesn't, if they're like, oh, well, what even do I front load? Maybe that's where I would go back to advocating for having a dietitian on your team and saying, hey, this could be some of those markers. These are those metrics that you can try to hit if you really want to feel like you're optimizing your health and perhaps your blood sugar.
It kind of points at the 80-20 rule too, because we still want to live. We want to enjoy a night out. We want to we want to enjoy somebody else cooking for us. I know that's always a plus, is to go out and enjoy
Yes.
the evening. So if the listeners are looking and listening to this and looking for maybe, if they're overwhelmed with all, with the situation or, going out, what is one small thing that they could do, um, as they're arriving to a restaurant? What do you think that first thing would be?
Yeah, that's such a good question.
Yeah.
I would, one small thing, we talked about so many things,
Yeah.
but I would say determine your comfort, right? So are you
Mm.
comfortable asking questions or not? Are you comfortable having more carbs or less carbs? Are you comfortable in your social situation? That's the small thing that can kind of, it translates to everything, but determine your comfort
Yeah.
and then try your best to work from there, because you don't have to necessarily go completely out of your comfort zone to have a wonderful evening. You can, that can also be a wonderful evening. That's what I teach people all the time, is
Right.
hey, we can do this, you can have this, you can whatever, and manage good blood sugar, but determine your comfort, and I think that that will take care of a lot of the rest.
That. I love that. Yeah, and it's kind of like setting our expectations. It's like, okay, so this is my goal as for these next couple hours. What am I hoping? When we're done eating tonight and we're on our way home, what am I hoping to be at? And it doesn't have to be a perfect blood sugar. It really is just kind of checking the box with the reason, like you say, the reason I'm here, the reason I'm spending time with people, and really
Yeah.
focusing on the event, and not being too hypercritical over our food choices or our blood sugar outcomes. And what about corrections? Again, I know this is advice that could be, there is no blanket advice because I know every situation is somewhat different. So, we can't really get into the weeds about that about any particular scenario. But what about corrections? And I think one of the scary parts, and I'll just kind of deter a little bit, is dinner, because there's going home. There's, oh, I'll be in bed in 2 hours. It's the overnight blood sugars. So there's a lot of things that could kind of respond later. Do you have
Yeah.
any general advice for that?
Yeah, I think that it goes back to setting your foundation. So if you know that, okay, I might go low, I might have a high, whether it's a low correction or a high correction,
Mhm.
knowing what might happen and taking that time, again, determine your comfort. So if you're going to bed in an hour and a half, 2 hours from now, maybe you have something that you know you can manage a bit better so that you don't have to worry about it, so you don't lose sleep, so that you don't wake up in a dangerous situation or not wake up, who knows, right? So determine your comfort. And then from there, I think if those things are happening regularly, I again have to advocate for having someone on your team to help you figure it out, because if it's working, great. If it's not, we figure it out. That's the whole thing. So for corrections, I will say you're right. It's specific, it's individualized, and only your healthcare providers can be the ones to tell you more specific numbers, strategies, systems, etc. But in the grand scheme of things, the underlying theme is going to be the same, and that is do what you can and do what you need to do. If you're high, maybe you do need to take a correction. If you're low, maybe you need a snack. And if that's a pattern, we need to figure out something better. If it's a one-off, so be it. That's something that happens to all of us. But if you're like, okay, I go out to dinner and then 2 hours later I'm going to bed, and then an hour after that this always happens, let's figure it out. And that's the best thing we can do.
Yeah, again, there's so many different pieces to the puzzle, and we don't mean to generalize this topic because we know how important it is. I think the number one thing, and if you could sum it up, because I know we've talked about a lot of things, but I think the mindset and just understanding that we do deserve to go out and we do
Yes.
deserve to enjoy a delicious food. And I think any sort of over expectation about what that's going to look and feel, and especially on the meter at the end of the at the end of the night, um, but the stress that can be involved with those situations, as we all know, stress does not help anything, especially blood sugar, because that's another piece of it as well, I think. But I think the number one thing you mentioned is really going in with a plan. Just to summarize,
Yeah, go in with a
yeah.
plan absolutely is a great summary. And I think one other detail is, like I said, know yourself.
Mm,
And so if you are someone who is only going to see that you didn't have a perfect blood sugar, that you went high, that you could have pre-bolus better, blah, 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 I really challenge you to find a compliment to give to yourself in this situation. No matter
mm,
how bad it was, give yourself a compliment, an
mm,
intentional one, a specific one. It can't be, okay, well, I did it. It should be, you know what? The blood sugar didn't work out how I wanted to, but I was able to X, Y, or Z, and I made it through the night. Like something specific. If that is you, try to give yourself that extra compliment.
I love that. Absolutely. Yes, yes, yes. A takeaway that's going to help us, that lifts, that we learn from, and it's going to lift us up. It's not going to bring us down, or it's not going to discourage us from trying again. You're right.
Exactly.
Because guess what? The friends are going to keep calling. Hey, let's get together for dinner tonight. So isn't it wonderful to say, yeah, let's do it, with rather than saying, oh, well, and then thinking back to the times it didn't work out. But I love that fact. It's just, this is life with diabetes. And there's always going to be some factors that we have to overcome, and it really is getting comfortable with yourself. I really appreciate all that advice.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Thank
what's
you.
what's coming up for you
Yeah,
work-wise as a
absolutely.
dietitian and diabetes educator? Would love to hear what's going on, Maddie.
Yes, absolutely. So, as you know, my Instagram and my online platform, pretty much you can find me anywhere as all words type one, type fun.
Love it.
And we've got some things coming up in 2025. I did a lot of video editing this morning, which I'm very excited about, but more education, a little bit of a vibe shift is what we're going for. I'm still actively taking some one-on-ones, and really I'm expanding into some writing, some other media opportunities. Love to join a podcast. So thank you, of course, again and again for
Absolutely.
today. So
Yes.
those are
So
all the
glad I
things that are
found you.
coming up. Yeah. And if
Good.
anyone wants to keep up, then absolutely find me.
Yeah, definitely. So, and we'll definitely link all this in the show notes. But yes, it's type one type fun. I love
Yes.
it. That is how they can get in touch with you. And yeah, we'll definitely link your website as well, and to stay connected with you, Maddie. Thanks so much.
And thank you.
Yes, I appreciate your time and this real relatable advice. This is a topic that it's timeless. These are things
It
that we
is.
need to know today, tomorrow, and forever living with diabetes. So again, thanks again. And yes, connect with Maddie, and I will put all that right here in the show notes. Everybody have an amazing rest of your day. Bye for now.